So, what just happened? Mark Carney has effectively reshaped the balance of power across North America. At the same time, Donald Trump appears to be realizing that his influence in this situation has significantly weakened. What Carney executed was not just a press appearance or a routine policy announcement. It marked a major shift away from a long-standing assumption that Canada relies far more on the United States than the United States relies on Canada. On Thursday, March 20th, 2025, Prime Minister Mark Carney addressed the public and introduced what he described as permanent economic sovereignty initiatives. This was not framed as a temporary strategy or a negotiating position, but as a long-term direction. His plan involves building new trade routes that reduce dependence on U.S. markets, and early understandings have already been reached with the European Union, Japan, and South Korea. Another development that stands out is the involvement of Mexico. Canada has begun aligning with a key U.S. trade partner in a way that could operate alongside existing agreements while reducing reliance on the United States. To understand how this developed, it is important to look back a few weeks. On February 28th, at 3:47 a.m., Donald Trump posted on Truth Social suggesting a 25% tariff on all Canadian imports, including resources like lumber, oil, natural gas, electricity, steel, and aluminum. He described this as a step toward correcting trade imbalances and stated that Canada would eventually return to negotiations. Mark Carney's response was notably measured. For 48 hours, there were no immediate public reactions or visible urgency. Then, on March 2nd, he delivered a concise and carefully structured statement. He explained that Canada had already analyzed multiple economic scenarios involving U.S. tariffs and had contingency plans in place dating back several years. He stated that if the United States chose to escalate economically, Canada would not respond with direct retaliation, but would instead move forward independently. That phrase, moving forward without them, captured the direction of his strategy. One key factor often overlooked is Canada's role in supplying critical resources to the United States. A significant portion of U.S. oil imports comes from Canada, and many northern states depend on Canadian hydroelectric power. In addition, Canadian pharmacies provide a large share of prescription medications to border regions, often at lower prices compared to domestic options. Another important resource is uranium, where Canada contributes a notable share of global supply, which is essential for nuclear energy development. These interconnected systems highlight how deeply integrated the two economies are. While these developments were unfolding, international engagement also increased. The president of the European Commission traveled to Ottawa in early March, signaling the importance of Canada as a partner. Shortly after, both sides agreed on a preliminary framework focused on rare earth supply chains that does not rely on the United States. Canada has significant untapped reserves of these materials, and this partnership aims to develop a supply network that supports technological industries while reducing reliance on other global powers. Around the same time, discussions with Mexico led to a proposed logistics initiative known as the Great Lakes Trade Corridor. This plan focuses on moving goods through Canadian infrastructure to reach global markets without passing through U.S. territory. It offers Mexico alternative access routes while allowing Canada to expand its trade network. Legally, agreements like USMCA remain in place until formal review periods, but new parallel systems can gradually reduce their practical importance. On March 18th, Carney introduced a long-term infrastructure plan valued at $800 billion. This includes new shipping routes, expanded rail systems, and modernization of key waterways to support global trade access. Funding is expected to come largely from Canadian pension funds, which are structured to support stable long-term investments. By framing economic independence as a national priority, Canada has created a pathway to finance these projects within existing legal frameworks. Political reactions in the United States have been cautious. While some concerns have been expressed privately about the economic impact of tariffs, public responses have remained measured. This reflects broader political dynamics where internal disagreements are not always openly addressed. Moving to March 20th, 2025, Carney presented a structured plan built around five main areas. The first focuses on energy, prioritizing domestic needs and trusted international partners, with pricing adjustments tied to external trade conditions. The second addresses pharmaceuticals, limiting large-scale exports while maintaining access for individual consumers with valid prescriptions. The third involves manufacturing collaboration, particularly with Mexico, to strengthen supply chains outside U.S. dependency. The fourth centers on strategic minerals, restricting exports to countries with reciprocal agreements. The fifth relates to data and digital infrastructure, requiring that data generated within Canada be stored domestically, reducing reliance on foreign platforms. In response, Donald Trump issued a strong public statement expressing disagreement with Canada's direction and predicting that economic pressure would lead Canada back to negotiations. However, early market indicators showed stability in Canada's currency and stock exchange, along with increased interest in Canadian residency from U.S. citizens. Looking ahead, there are several possible paths. One option would involve revisiting trade policies and pursuing renewed negotiations. Another could involve continuing with tariffs, which may lead to higher costs in areas like energy and manufacturing. A third possibility includes broader policy measures that could further reshape trade relationships. Each scenario carries different implications for both countries. Additional international coordination is also emerging. Reports indicate discussions between Canada and Australia regarding resource strategies. Combined, these countries hold significant shares of key materials like lithium and uranium, which are essential for energy and technology sectors. Expanded cooperation among allied nations could create new economic blocs independent of traditional structures. Within Canada, public support for these policies appears strong, with surveys indicating high approval levels. This reflects a broader national shift toward economic independence and long-term planning. Public discussions emphasize self-reliance, infrastructure investment, and diversified global partnerships. From a broader perspective, this situation highlights the importance of trust and stability in international trade. Agreements are not only based on economic factors, but also on consistent relationships and mutual confidence. Over time, changes in policy and communication can influence how partners respond and adapt. For individuals in the United States, these developments may have practical effects. Energy prices, supply chains, and access to certain goods could be influenced by shifting trade patterns. Industries that rely on cross-border cooperation may need to adjust, and long-term planning becomes increasingly important. At a global level, the United States remains a major economic and political force. However, regional dynamics in North America are evolving. Canada's approach demonstrates how a mid-sized economy can reposition itself through strategic planning and partnerships. Other countries may observe these developments as they consider their own trade strategies. This also reflects a broader transition in the global system. The international landscape is becoming more multipolar, with multiple regions developing independent economic networks. Countries are exploring ways to strengthen their own positions while maintaining balanced relationships. Ultimately, this moment represents a shift in how North American economic relationships are structured. Canada is moving toward a model based on independence and diversified partnerships. The United States now faces decisions on how to respond within this changing environment. The coming weeks and months will provide more clarity on how these strategies develop and what their long-term impact will be.